Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I really wanted to share my birth story with my daughter. I don't even really know where to start, to be honest. So the birth of my daughter was a planned home birth, and then it turned into an emergency cesarean. So I mean, those two things are quite different, and it was my first experience of birth. And I think that a lot of people could benefit from hearing my experience. So I haven't planned this out or anything. It's literally just going to be off the cuff as I remember all the details. So I would grab yourself a hot drink and sit down for the ride. So I guess I should start in my pregnancy. And my pregnancy was pretty uneventful, to be honest. It was quite boring, which is quite nice. It was during COVID, so I had my daughter in 2021, so it was like right at the height of when you weren't allowed to like go anywhere, you had to stay home. But I was really lucky in the sense that I had all of my scans and everything. My husband was still allowed to come in. I don't know why, they just allowed him to come. But I was like a low risk pregnancy, and it was pretty uneventful. I did have a bit of morning sickness in up to about 16 weeks, but again, it was nothing major, just kind of what normal women get, I think. And I did feel movement really, really early, which was quite unusual. I think I felt movement from about like 10 or 12 weeks, which was lovely. It was really reassuring. She kicked regularly. She had a pattern and a routine that was super predictable. So like everything in my pregnancy was really kind of boring, to be honest. And because of this, it made me a really good candidate to have a home birth, which is inevitably what I chose to do. And I was adamant that I wanted a home birth. I wanted a drug-free, like natural birth in the pool. Like I wanted to get a birth pool. I wanted to have my daughter in the water. And I had this big kind of vision for what kind of birth that I was going to have. And I didn't doubt myself. I really just believed that I was going to have that birth. And so when I was doing my birth prep, because it was COVID, there wasn't really any like NCT or any classes that I could go to in person. And my midwife didn't really signpost me to what options I had available in terms of like online learning. And I literally didn't really know anything at that point about labour. I watched loads of birth videos and birth stories on YouTube. So I kind of, I had an idea, and I'd watched like loads of different types of birth because it is unpredictable. But I just had in my mind that I was going to have this birth that I'd imagined. So I did some research, and I did find hypnobirthing, but I didn't research well enough, and I took a quite well-known online course that was like pre-recorded videos that you're supposed to watch with your birth partner, which would have been my husband. And he was really, really on board as well, like super supportive, everything like that. So I started to do the videos with him, but it would just send him to sleep. They were quite boring, if I'm honest. And he would just use the videos, I think, to like put him to sleep at night. And I wasn't really taking much in, and I completely skipped over the section that was about cesareans, because I just thought, that's not me, that's not going to happen to me. I'm having a home birth and that's it. So skip forward to my last trimester, and my due date came and went, and I was absolutely fed up at this point. I was massive, I had sciatica, I felt so emotional, and I was just so done being pregnant. And I just really, really wanted to meet my baby. So I had this really old school midwife. She was like just about to retire. She retired, I think, after me. I think I was like her last lady that she'd had. And she was like really old school, which I really, really liked. I felt really safe with her. She was so on board about home birth as well. She'd had 4 children and all of them she'd had at home. So like she was definitely the right midwife for me at that time. And she was really supportive of me having a home birth. And she came to visit me at 40 plus 4, I think I was. And she visited me at home, I think partly because I was having a home birth and partly because I was, because it was COVID, so they did like home visits. So she came and she said that she would like to do a stretch and sweep. And me not having really taken in the information that I had on the hypnobirthing and not really doing much information, I went for the stretch and sweep. So she did that. That was like quite uncomfortable. I remember just like laying down on my bed with a towel. It's so weird, in my bedroom. And she did this stretch and sweep. And she said to me, this is probably going to do nothing. Because you're a first time mum, this probably isn't going to do anything, and you'll probably need another stretch and sweep, and then maybe even another one after that. And I don't expect to hear from you for ages, basically. Which left me feeling kind of like, I really thought that this was going to move things along. So she went home, and like baby sounded beautiful and everything was fine. And that was about 10 a.m. in the morning that I had that sweep. And like nothing happened throughout the day. She just said like, go on about your day. And just don't stay at home, like just do whatever you're going to do. But I didn't really feel like doing anything. I was so fed up that I just spent the day at home pottering around, and I spent quite a lot of time on my birth ball. And it was about 4 o'clock that afternoon that I was on my birth ball, like watching TV, just like bouncing around, when I started to get back pain. And I was like, oh, that back pain's like quite sharp. And then it would go, and then it would come back, and then it would go. And it took me a little while to kind of clock on and think, could this be it? Like, am I going into labour? Because I was expecting all of the pain and discomfort and contractions to be like in front, in my belly, but they weren't. It was all in my back. And I said to my husband, I think this could be something. Should we time them? So we downloaded the Freya app. We'd had that like ready to go, and I started to time these pains, or these kind of like, they were just really dull period pains, and we started to time them, and they were quite regular, and they were getting more regular, and they were getting longer. So I was like, this is probably labour. And they kind of built in intensity until it got to the point where it was unmistakably labour. And it was so funny because my midwife had said to me that she was going to give blood that night, and that was fine because she, again, didn't expect to hear from me. And then it got to about 9 o'clock. I'd been kind of breathing through these contractions, and they were getting quite sharp. So I remember ringing her and saying to her, I think your sweep actually did the job, because I'm pretty sure I'm in labour now. And she said, okay, that's fine. She was so unbothered. She was like, that's fine. I won't come out to you just yet. They need to be 3 minutes long, and you need to be having them. They need to be a minute long, and you need to be having them. It's like 3 and 10 minutes. So ring me back when it gets to that point. Otherwise, you're doing great. So I carried on like that for another hour, and then I went to the toilet, and it was like I'd done a sneeze in the toilet, and it was my mucus plug, and it was really, really mucusy, and I was like, right, this is definitely labour then, like things are happening. So I remember saying to my husband, I've lost my mucus plug, I saw it in the toilet, things are definitely moving, and the pain was getting quite intense. And it did say on our app, like, you should go to hospital now. So I said, I think we do actually need to ring the midwife back and see what she says. So I ended up ringing her back at about 10 o'clock that night, and I was like, right, I know it's only been an hour, but things have really picked up, and I'm actually in quite a lot of discomfort. I was pacing around the kitchen. I wasn't mooing yet, but I was definitely, things were getting on. So she said, all right, I'll come out and see how you are. So she came, super chill, like so unbothered, and she said, I think that you should get the birth pool set up because it does sound like things are progressing and, you know, like you're definitely in labour. So my husband, all excited, was like prepping the birth pool. I have this picture of him smiling and putting the birth pool up, and we're just so happy at this point that like things are happening, and you know, it's a big deal. We were having our first baby and it was really exciting, and we were just so naive going into that experience. So yeah, I have this lovely photo of him putting up the birth pool. So he put the birth pool up, we started to fill it up. It takes quite a long time to fill, they're quite big. And when she came, she kind of observed me having a few contractions and agreed that yeah, I was in labour, and she said, yeah, you can get in the pool now. So I got in the pool, and I was on all fours, and I did say to her, like, all the pain is in my back. She said that's absolutely fine, that's normal. And things were starting to like look like they were heating up. The pain was getting, you know, a bit more intense, and I was starting to like move around like instinctively. I was getting on all fours, and things were getting quite uncomfortable. And she said that she could tell by looking at me and sort of hearing the noises I was making that things were progressing. So she said that she would like to call the second midwife because she thought that this was going to be quite a quick labour, and you know, she wanted to call the second midwife along because she thought the birth was, you know, basically around the corner. So she called this midwife and she turned up, and then she said, I think that we need to do a exam just to see where you are. Can I do an internal examination on you? And I said yes. So we got out and she examined me, and as she was doing it, I just saw this look on her face, and she said to me, you're 3 centimetres. And when I heard that, my heart just sank. I was sure she was going to tell me that I was like 7 or 8 centimetres. It was getting pretty intense. And then she said, and the other piece of news that I have for you is that your baby is OP. So baby was basically the wrong way round. So she was facing with her back against my back instead of the other way around. So she would be coming out sunny side up. She said, I'm really, really happy to deliver an OP baby at home. I've done it before, and it's not a major complication, but it does mean that those labours are usually a lot longer and they're a lot more painful. And just hearing that was like a punch in the gut, because this was like midnight. I'd been going since 4 o'clock and I was already really tired, and I was only 3 centimetres, and there she is telling me that I've got a really long and painful road ahead of me. So I started on some gas and air. When you have a home birth in the UK, they do bring gas and air, so I started on that, and that was amazing. She didn't have to tell me how to use that. I was loving that. And it got to the point where I thought I needed a bit more pain relief, basically, and I was just really tired and upset that I was only 3 centimetres and that this baby was in the wrong position. And we tried lots of different positions to kind of get baby to turn. I walked around, I was really mobile, and it just wasn't happening. She was just stuck in this OP position. So the decision was made that I should be transferred to hospital, going on, to be honest. And I remember it was quite a funny spectacle, I imagine, from our neighbours, because we had like a truck at the time and it was quite high, and I God knows what it must have looked like, because I was scrabbling to get in this really high truck, and I had this massive gas and air canister with me with my husband in the truck. Like, I was really kind of hoofing that gas and air down, and the midwife followed us to the hospital. When we got there, it was, she took us straight up to the labour ward, and I remember in the corridor of the labour ward, as soon as we stepped in there, I had this huge contraction that brought me to my knees, and it was so painful. And the nurse or the midwife that was taking over she just looked at me like I was being really dramatic, and there was no compassion there. My midwife, picked me up, took me into the room and was like, you're going to be okay, but you do probably need more pain relief. Like, she was telling me that I needed more pain relief. And as a first time mum, when your beloved midwife, who you've seen from day dot up until now, tells you need something, like, you really believe her. And they'd made a big fuss about baby being in the wrong position and all of this stuff. So almost immediately I was having an epidural, and I'm sure that I must have consented to that epidural, but I don't remember it. And they examined me and said that I wasn't as dilated as she said that I was, because the baby has basically been pushing on the sac of waters, which has been making me look like I was further along than I actually was. So that was great as well, considering how much pain I was in. They said it'd be best if you have the epidural, it will relax your body, and that's just the best thing to do. So hop up on the bed and we're going to do that. So I had the epidural, which was fine. And then I was just confined to the bed, really. And they let me go for a few more hours, contracting and labouring. Bearing in mind at this point, it's probably been about 12 hours since I started labour. And they kept examining me every 4 hours, and they weren't happy with the progress. So the next thing they wanted to do was to put me on a hormone drip to basically interfere with my labour and speed labour up. They were a bit concerned that things just weren't moving along as quickly as they'd want. So I went on the hormone drip, and I wasn't able to move around because I'd had the epidural. Now, the epidural didn't fully work for me, so I was still feeling contractions. I know that, like loads of women, it just completely takes all the pain away and you don't feel anything. I could still feel contractions, and that didn't really change. Baby didn't move position, still in bad position. So I had the hormone drip, and that really did ramp up my contractions, but it took a long time for me to dilate. So fast forward to me being fully dilated, they wanted me to start pushing, and I was obviously on my back pushing, and I was pushing with all my might, and they could see baby's head, so she was really far down the birth canal, but she just wasn't moving in that position, and it was becoming really painful for me. I was really, really uncomfortable. The pressure was almost unbearable. Like, that urge to push was so strong, and it was really disheartening that they were basically telling me that nothing was happening, and that all of that effort I was putting in was for nothing, and I was absolutely exhausted by the end of it. So they decided that they wanted to manually turn the baby, and I'd already had an obstetrician come in about 3 or 4 times telling me that I should have a cesarean, and I kept saying no, because unless it was an emergency and I really needed it, I really wanted to give birth naturally. I really wanted that kind of birth, and I believed that it could happen. And I had one midwife next to me who was telling me, you're going to have a natural birth, you don't need a cesarean, just keep going. So I listened to her, and we batted away the obstetrician, but he kept coming back in, and then a doctor came in and said that they were going to manually turn the baby. So I had this doctor's whole arm inside of me. He put his hand on baby's head, so I had him inside of me. I had the monitors around me monitoring her heart rate, And then I also had an ultrasound so they could see what baby was doing while he tried to manually turn the baby. It was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. He couldn't do it, so a midwife tried. I had 3 people in the end try to manually turn her, and it wasn't working. And then she turned a little bit, and they said, oh, she's turning, but she's turned into a worse position now, and a position that she cannot be born in. So they asked me what I wanted to do, because she was starting to get a little bit of swelling on her head from that intense pressure that I could feel. And obviously an emergency cesarean was suggested, in part because of the baby. Even though she wasn't in distress, they were worried that she was going to be in distress, and then that would be an emergency. But also for me, they were advising me that it was probably going to be causing quite a lot of damage to my pelvis to keep going like this. Just because of the immense pressure and her being stuck, it was probably going to damage me inside. So I just said yes. And I remember my husband was like asking for alternatives and, you know, saying, can we just have 5 more minutes? And I said, you know what, let's just do it. I'm so exhausted and I just want to meet this baby. So they wheeled me off. And it wasn't a category like 1 cesarean, it was cat 2, so it was like an emergency, but I had about half an hour. And they wheeled me off. They took the gas and air off of me, and I had this lovely anaesthetist, this young guy, and he said to me, I'm going to give you a spinal tap. I'm going to take out the epidural, I'm going to give you a spinal tap, and this is going to take away all the pain that you've been feeling. And he was right. When he gave me the spinal tap, it was like my body was just like became liquid against the bed, and I just felt completely heavy and weightless at the same time. It's really bizarre, but I felt my body just relax. So I must have been holding on to so much tension you know, at the end. And then they did the operation. They cut me open, and my little girl was born. We didn't know what we were having, so it was a complete surprise for us to be having a little girl. They held her up over the sheet, but I was really scared, and I kept having all these feelings that like I had failed in some way, hadn't managed to give birth to her the right way, or the way I'd imagined. And you know, that came with a lot of feelings to process. But my little girl was completely healthy. She was beautiful. They put her straight on my chest. God, that feeling was like I'd known her forever. It wasn't like, oh, nice to meet you, baby. It was like, oh, there you are. She stopped crying immediately when they put her on me, and they gave her this little pink hat, delivered the placenta, stitched me up, and I was good to go. And I stayed on the postnatal ward for a couple of days, you know, while I was working out feeding and all that sort of stuff. And I was just so in love, and I don't think I really processed my birth experience fully, because you're just so focused on the baby, you kind of just forget about you. But I did have a midwife come round to me the next day asking if I wanted to talk to someone about the birth I'd had, and I think that kind of reiterated to me that, like, not that something had gone wrong, but that it was quite unusual to have a 32-hour labour and have an emergency section at full dilation, where they actually told me that they had to pull her back out of the birth canal because she was so far down, and they said that it was quite a rough birth, it was quite a rough cesarean. Yeah, that was my birth story. She came home a couple of days later, and there we are. She wasn't a small baby, that she was, you know, a chunky baby for me. She was £7.13, and yeah, so that was Sage's birth. I really hope that you enjoyed listening to that, and I hope that you can take something away from it. And in my next video, I'm going to be talking about my birth of my son, which was a completely different birth experience, and it was really, really healing and such a beautiful experience. I can't wait to tell you all about that and how it compared to my first. So until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye.